every member of the Fellowship remembered Gandalf's last words. "Fly, you fools!" And fly they did. Guided by Gandalf, the 3 Great Eagles, Gwaihir, Landroval and Meneldor, picked up Frodo and Sam and took flight over Mordor, after the destruction of the One Ring. But why not before? Why did the Great Eagles only involve themselves with the goings-on in Middle-earth when their help was a luxury, and when it could have saved lives, they did naught? Welcome back, Meneldor, to this latest lesson. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified of the next lesson, where we will look at whether or not Frodo was the best pick to be the ring bearer, or if it might have better been Sam. And for those who want to bring a bit of Arda into their house in this new year, we have created a calendar with 12 beautiful scenes by Steffi Art and a rather flattering portrait of yours truly, if I may say so myself. Our patrons will get a discount code on top of their existing benefits, so everyone can click the link and bring a beautiful portrait of Arda into their home for 2024. However, this week we will ask the old question: why did the Fellowship not fly to Mordor? To answer that question, we must first understand what the Great Eagles actually were. I have heard many different stories over the ages. They were spirits made flesh, they were animals elevated by the Valar themselves, they were creations of the music of the Ainur, though without a Fea, and all of those theories indeed have their origins in the writings of Tolkien himself. For through the good professor, many tales from the elder days have been passed down to us, and many of those tales were often representations of what some people believed to be the truth, rather than what really was. However, in his latest texts, given to us shortly before his death, Tolkien confirms to us that the Great Eagles of Manwë were indeed Maiar. They were those divine angelic spirits who originated from the time before the creation of Ea, similar to, for example, Gandalf and Sauron. Though originally incorporeal, they chose to take the form of these gigantic birds of prey, whilst retaining their immortality as well as some supernatural abilities. They had been given that task to watch over the children of Ilúvatar and keep recurring evil at bay by their lord, Manwë, king of the Valar, lord of the breath of Arda and vice-regent of Eru. Thousands of years before the events of the War of the Ring, the Great Eagles were present in Middle-earth, at a time when the world was shaking with the waves of war, as the Free Peoples fought against Melkor Morgoth, the first Dark Lord and progenitor of all evil in creation. Even back then, the Great Eagles supported the Free Peoples and intervened in many dire situations. For example, they guarded the legendary elven city of Gondolin, they kept an eye on the hellish fortress of Angband, and even fought against the winged fire dragons in the War of Wrath that ended the First Age of the Sun. Even when Morgoth was overthrown and Sauron took his place as Dark Lord, the Great Eagles remained in Middle-earth, forming an eternal sentinel to offer a glimmer of hope in the darkest hours. We all know of their actions in the events of Thorin's Company and the War of the Ring. However, all of these situations have one thing in common. At no time did the Eagles themselves take the initiative, and never did they use their full power. They had always took on a supporting role and had never been directly in the center of any event. In these later sagas, the Eagles mostly saved individuals like Gandalf, Sam and Frodo when their situations were exceedingly dire, but they did not do anything more. So, why not? The answer to that, Meneldor, is unfortunately as disappointing as it is simple. They were forbidden to do so. Allow me to explain. The story of creation, as conceived and envisioned by Eru Ilúvatar, the creator and all-father, who resided in the timeless halls outside of creation, primarily dealt with the eternal war of elves and men against evil. This was the course of events that the Valar and Maiar, who, in this respect, acted as guardians to the world, were in no way allowed to prevent or greatly influence. For in this great framework of creation, every being and every character found their purpose and could contribute their own little chapter to the larger world events. The Valar and Maiar, as I mentioned, were guardians, not actors themselves. They were the executors of the greater lines of Ilúvatar's dream, and thus they were not to act directly in the goings-on of Arda, and should guard that overall line that Eru had set out. Only if evil became too overwhelming and the free peoples of Middle-earth were unable to win on their own, would they be allowed to intervene, with the Creator's permission, and support the elves and men. And, to be completely honest, the Valar had in fact already failed and disobeyed that commandment in the past, when they brought most of the elves away from Middle-earth to their land of Valinor. They later did realize this mistake, and thenceforth acted even more carefully. The best example of this were the Istari. They were Maiar, sent to Middle-earth in a weakened human form to give the free peoples aid in defeating the all-powerful Sauron. But they were directly forbidden to fight in the war themselves, and for them themselves to challenge Mordor with their angelic might. They were to be counselors and guides, not conquering generals in their own rights. This was very similar to the Eagles. They were under the direct command of Manwë, and at his behest they watched over Middle-earth and observed what was happening, but, like with the Istari, they were not to directly interfere. But, even if the Eagles had played a larger role in the events of the War of the Ring, even if they had themselves brought the ring to Mordor, the quest would have been, contrary to all expectations, by no means easier, and would most likely have ended in ruin and damnation. It was exactly because the Eagles were Maiar, were powerful, intelligent creatures. They could have been influenced and seduced by the One Ring. Just like Gandalf feared carrying the ring, so it would be a danger to the Eagles. Thus, bringing the ring directly to Mordor would be out of the question. Alternatively, of course, they could have carried the ring-bearer and his companions on their backs. Quite the angelic piggyback ride. But that would have also presented new problems. The Dark Lord Sauron and his countless scouts would have soon noticed the Eagles and would be sure to guess their mission. There would have been an unexpected battle in the skies above Mordor. The Eagles against the winged beasts, the countless archers, and possibly other horrors that Sauron had in store for his enemies in his Black Land. A victory would be uncertain, though not completely impossible. Suppose that the Eagles had won such a battle and emerged victorious with more or less heavy losses. Would that have meant the victory of the Free Peoples and the downfall of Sauron? Absolutely not. The One Ring was not just powerful, it was mighty and untamable by any creature that lived in the vastness of Middle-earth. No one, no elf, man or dwarf, no wizard and or eagle could have thrown the ring into the fires of Mount Doom, where its power was at its greatest and all free will was paralyzed or broken. Even Frodo broke at that last moment and did not cast the One Ring into the fire. Yes, Frodo broke. He claimed the ring and forsook his quest to destroy it. Only when Gollum bit the ring, finger and all, off Frodo's hand, did the fate of the ring be sealed. For only through sheer chance, when Gollum danced on the edges of the cliff in his final reunion with his precious, did he slip and fall with the ring into the undoing lava below. As Tolkien himself describes it,
Frodo deserved all honor because he spent every drop of his power of will and body, and that was just sufficient to bring him to the destined point, and no further. Few others, possibly no others of his time, would have got so far. The other power then took over, the writer of the story, by which I do not mean myself, that one ever-present person who is never absent and never named.
Even in the story as we knew it from the books, it required the direct intervention of Ilúvatar to bring the pieces together and have that exceptionally unlikely chance of Gollum slipping made certainty by his intervention. But with the Fellowship flying to Mordor, who would have been there to take Gollum's place? And that leaves us with the story we know, of the Great Eagles being those who help, but only the bare minimum, just like they had been ordered to do. Fly, you fools. Sometimes a seemingly cryptic message from one we know to be mysterious is just that old friend telling you to run like hell. Thus we conclude this chapter and this video. Did the knowledge surprise you? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed it and would like to help us spread the histories of Arda to the wider world, you can bring a bit of that beautiful place into your home with our new 2024 calendar. With 13 breathtaking paintings from the amazing Steffi art, all framed to make each month something special. And there is a special discount for our patrons as a thank you for their support. But regardless of that, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified of the next chapter in the Mysteries of Westerness, when we will look at whether or not Frodo really was the best ring bearer, or if it would have better been Sam. But for now, I have been Irjikor Kuruvane, and I wish you all Namarie Meldonjar.